Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, or vanitas, vanitatum, omnias vanitas, says the text on the front of this tableau. It's a quote from Ecclesiastes that's instructing the viewer on how to contemplate this image. At first, this work screams death, but in actuality, it's far more complex. It's a contemplation piece on how we reconcile life and death during our lifetime. It may seem counterintuitive, but for many cultures, viewing death as ever-present was incentive to live a better life. And we can see that very clearly in this fantastic 18th century vanitas. Vanitas, in its most simple translation from Latin, means vanity, but it's far more complex than that. It means futility, aimlessness, worthlessness, and the emptiness of being obsessed with material objects, because material objects will all eventually fade. To be obsessed with worldly possessions is to be obsessed with emptiness. For example, we can see that here in the flowers. Flowers are typical vanitas iconography. What do flowers do once they bloom? They almost immediately die. Also on the wrist, we have jewelry, and jewelry is also typical vanitas iconography, symbolizing unnecessary adornment and excessive wealth. Essentially, you can't take it with you. But what can you take with you from this earthly realm? Your soul. A vanitas is a reminder not to neglect your spiritual essence, not to neglect your religious practice. There are a few Christian symbols more heavily weighted than the apple. It represents the temptation of Eve by the devil and the fall of man, original sin. We can see that here on the side of the vanitas tableau. This is certainly a head that is obsessed with earthly possessions. But on the top of the head, we see a salamander. Now, salamander is a poisonous lizard, but in early Christian iconography, salamanders symbolized creatures that could be resistant to fire, especially the fires of hell and the fires of passion. So although this head might seem hopeless at first, it is fighting with this idea of resisting the fires of earthly temptation. What's interesting about this vanitas is that it's actually three-dimensional, whereas most vanitas imagery was painted or printed. The three-dimensionality and its life-size nature make the image more visceral and real. You can see that the animals really inhabit this skull. The spider sits atop the empty eye socket, and the little maggots maybe eat the remaining flesh from the skull. The snake curls around the back of the skull and through the empty eye socket. Nature truly inhabits this skull now. There's no trace of humanity. It may seem morbid, but it's truly a piece of contemplation. What occupies us here on earth will most likely be irrelevant at death. Whether spiritual, religious, or atheist, this work can help us contemplate the fleeting nature of material possessions. How might that impact the way that we live our lives today?